EU leaders failed to persuade Hungary's Viktor Orbán to lift his block on the €90 billion loan for Ukraine. Denmark and its allies reportedly deployed troops to Greenland in January because they feared a US invasion.
Iceland's foreign minister tells Euronews now is the time to revive talks to join the EU as the bloc's membership would strengthen the country's economic security.
EU leaders failed to persuade Hungary's Viktor Orbán to lift his block on the €90 billion loan for Ukraine at summit talks on Thursday. Orbán's veto is linked to the interruptions of oil deliveries through the damaged Druzhba pipeline, which he claims is deliberately being kept shut by Ukraine.
We would like to get the oil which is ours from the Ukrainians, which is now blocked by the Ukrainians. I will never support any kind of decision here which is in favor of Ukraine. Still, the Hungarians are not able to get the oil which belongs to us.
EU leaders also kept up strong language on the ongoing war in Iran, doubling down on their refusal to aid the US and Israeli military campaigns. Some leaders expressed willingness to help secure the Strait of Hormuz, a key waterway which Iran has effectively closed off, but they stressed hostilities must first end before considering such a move.
Und dann können wir viel tun, bis hin auch zu der Öffnung der Seewege und sie freizuhalten. Aber das machen wir nicht im laufenden Kampfhandlungen, sondern das machen wir nur dann, wenn die Kampfhandlungen beendet sind. Es braucht dann auch ein internationales Mandat, das wir gegenwärtig nicht haben. Und deswegen stehen hier noch viele Schritte vor uns, bevor wir überhaupt über ein solches Thema nachdenken können.
Cette escalade est inconsidérée. J'ai pu hier ensuite parler avec le président Trump. Et il a, dans la nuit, lui-même appelé à cesser tous ces bombardements et ces attaques contre les infrastructures civiles, gaz, pétrole, mais aussi eau. Et je veux dire ici, nous défendons l'idée d'un moratoire sur les infrastructures civiles, les personnes civiles dans ce conflit et une désescalade rapide.
The 27 heads of state and government are also addressing competitiveness, the single market, trade, security, migration, the multilateral system, and the next EU budget. Denmark and its allies reportedly deployed troops to Greenland in January because they feared a US invasion, Danish broadcaster DR has reported. DR said it had seen a military operations order dated the 13th of January, which served as the basis for the deployment of Danish forces in the autonomous Danish territory as tensions spiked over US President Donald Trump's bid to annex it. The document described an operation organizing the defense of Greenland immediately after the US operation in Venezuela to oust President Nicolas Maduro. In January, several EU nations, including France, Germany, Sweden, the Netherlands, and others, sent troops to Greenland under a Danish-led NATO exercise dubbed Arctic Endurance. But several military officials told DR that it was a real deployment and not an exercise. Trump has repeatedly said he believes the US must control Greenland to ensure its national security, and long refused to rule out the use of military force to get it. After several intense weeks of aggressive remarks that plunged the alliance into its deepest crisis in years, Trump backed down from his threats in late January, announcing that he had reached a framework agreement on Greenland with NATO's Secretary General, the details of which remain vague.
After witnessing the US administration's confrontation with Denmark and the EU over Greenland, Iceland now sees EU membership as a safe bet. The country's foreign minister told Euronews in an interview on Europe Today that EU membership would strengthen the country's economic security. But first, the island nation will put the question to a referendum due on August 29, where voters will be asked if they favor the revival of formal talks for EU membership.
It's just a simple question, Should we continue the negotiation talks, yes or no? And from my point of view, if you say no, you are closing a lot of doors. Instead of saying yes, should we not continue, see what kind of negotiation and agreement we will get.
Iceland watched with trepidation when US President Donald Trump said last January that he would take Greenland. On Thursday, the country's foreign minister maintained relations with Washington were intact and urged the EU to act like a superpower.
The European Union is a superpower, and they should act like a superpower. if I could say so. And you just, if you watch and recall the Greenland's agenda from the US part, it was quite clear that the European Union was a backbone for Denmark and Greenland when these statements were made on the US behalf. And I think that was beneficial for Denmark, but it was also useful for us in Iceland to see, okay, European Union and most of the countries, they can stand with other nations when they are, in a way, attacked.
Iceland has been a member of the EU's single market through the European Free Trade Association, EFTA, since 1970. The island, with a population of around 400,000, is also part of the EU's Schengen free travel area.
This war must be stopped immediately because everyone knows who is the biggest beneficiary and the cause of the conflict. Strong words from the Qatari Prime Minister on Thursday. Speaking alongside the Turkish Foreign Minister, Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani said Qatar is demanding Iran stop attacks on Gulf nations, calling it a, quote, dangerous escalation that is hitting civilians and threatening global energy security. This comes after Israel targeted Iran's main natural gas field on Wednesday. Tehran responded quickly, firing missiles at energy facilities across the Gulf, including sites in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Qatar's key gas hub, Ras Laffan.
عرجنا على ما تم على الاعتداء الذي تم يوم أمس في مجمع الطاقة في راس لفان. للأسف هذا العمل التخريبي الذي يدل على شيء يدل على سياسة عدوانية ولا مسؤولية وتصعيد خطير من الجانب الإيراني، رغم أن دولة قطر منذ الساعة الأولى عند الاعتداء على المنشآت الطاقة والبنية التحتية الإيرانية من قبل إسرائيل أدانت هذا الاعتداء، وكان الرد الإيراني على هذا الاعتداء الإسرائيلي بالاعتداء بشكل مباشر على دولة قطر.
Qatar shares the world's largest natural gas reserve with Iran, making the region critical to global energy supply. Ras Laffan is the world's largest liquefied natural gas export facility, and any disruption there is already being felt. European gas prices have surged to their highest level since the conflict began 3 weeks ago, as concerns grow over supply. Qatar Energy says the attacks caused extensive damage to its main energy hub in the north of the country, adding pressure to an already volatile global energy market. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump said in a social media post that Israel acted alone and was solely responsible for Wednesday's strikes. The Turkish foreign minister went even further, pointing squarely at Israel for opening the region to what he called a battlefield that threatens global security. Still, Hakan Fidan said Turkish mediators are speaking to both Iran and the US to push for de-escalation, adding that almost all of the world wants this war to end. Adil Halim, Euronews, Doha.
For many farmers in Germany, the war in Iran has now reached their fields. In March, when winter wheat, rapeseed and other crops urgently need nutrients, fertilizer is becoming scarcer and more expensive. One reason is the blocked Strait of Hormuz. A large portion of the global fertilizer trade passes through it. At the same time, energy and transportation costs are rising.
Ich kenne Bauern, die haben noch nicht 1 Kilogramm Stickstoff auf ihrem Hof geliefert bekommen. Die haben natürlich ein Riesenproblem, weil die gesamte Vegetation nach hinten geschoben wird. Die Pflanzen können sich nicht vernünftig die haben keine vernünftige Jugendentwicklung. Also die werden ein Thema haben in Ertrag und Qualität.
Normally, fertilization proceeds according to plan during these weeks, but this time things are very different. Since late February, markets have come under pressure, deliveries have stalled and prices are rising.
Aber den Sonnabend vor 1,5 Wochen ging das Drama ja los mit den riesen Sprüngen, also beim Spritmarkt diese Sprünge. Ja, und als uns dann unser Spediteur gesagt hat, er kann uns keinen Dünger liefern, weil Pisteritz keinen mehr produziert, beziehungsweise nur noch massiv gedrosselt produziert, ja, konnte ich mir schon gut vorstellen, dass das natürlich Auswirkungen auf uns hat. Ein Stück weit ist der Krieg hier angekommen. Ne?
European agriculture is also heavily dependent on Russia for fertilizer. Around 20% of fertilizer imports into the EU still came from Russia in 2025. But for farmers, the question isn't where from. Their fears for their livelihoods are too great.
Hier wird jetzt die Anlage gelegt für Ertrag und Qualität. Und wenn das nicht möglich ist, haben wir keinen Ertrag oder deutlich eingeschränkten Ertrag und keine Qualitäten, um jetzt Backgetreide zu produzieren. Das ist das Problem.
Peters is still trying to mitigate the shortage with fermentation residues, but if fertilizer remains scarce, the crisis could soon affect consumers as well.
Dozens of beloved dogs and cats arrived in Athens alongside their owners on a special repatriation flight for Greeks with pets who had been stranded because of the war in the Middle East. Heartwarming scenes unfolded at Athens airport as the adorable animals excitedly leapt about after being released from their carriers. Pet owners were extremely emotional.
To me, my pet, my cat is my family. There is no chance I'm going to leave him behind. And right now, the airlines that serve the United Arab Emirates, they don't accept pets because of the situation. They don't accept pets in cabin, and they didn't accept pets in cargo. There are limited spots for pets in cargo, and they only opened that late last week, so it is very, very difficult to fly out the country with your pets.
The flight had been delayed for several days due to drone attacks near Abu Dhabi airport. In the end, it departed with 101 passengers and 45 pets on board.
Τα ζώα μας δεν είναι αποσκευές, είναι μέλη των οικογενειών μας και αυτό η ελληνική κυβέρνηση σήμερα το έκανε πράξη. Ζώα και άνθρωποι ήρθαν στην Ελλάδα με ασφάλεια.